Nesta aqui é a primeira edição do Periférico Inglês, estive à conversa com o Cory Scheviak, Senior Gameplay Designer e Social Impact Advisor na Mojang Studios. Essa conversa incidiu principalmente sobre desenvolvimento de jogos enquanto carreira e enquanto outlet criativo para o pessoal de software. Espero que gostem e desculpem o meu inglês. Good afternoon, Cory Scheviak. Yeah, I'd like to start by asking, like, you were here like a month ago, maybe? A month and a half.
Yeah, at the event, yes.
How was it? How did you feel about Portugal and stuff?
That was fantastic. I really enjoyed getting to visit the school and seeing all the students. It was really cool getting to walk around a different campus because the campus I went to was enormous, and getting to see the University of, okay, I'm gonna try and pronounce this right, Minho.
It's Minho, NH, like
Minho.
the Spanish ñe or the Portuguese ñe.
Yes. Okay. That I should have known then. The University of Minho was really, really cool. I really enjoyed the campus. It was much smaller than I was expecting, actually. But it was really fun to see all the students walking around and enjoying the software engineering week and getting really involved in all the different activities and talking to the different companies you all had. And it was really fun, of course, to talk to you all and get up on stage and share my story. And I felt really welcomed, felt very invited, and really appreciated for being there, which was really nice. And Portugal was, honestly, I'm not gonna lie, I was a little disappointed because it was cloudy the entire time I was there, and I had this preconceived vision of Portugal as this always sunny, warm place. And then I arrived and I was like, oh, right, winter is everywhere. And that was, I guess, a brutal realization for me. But I still had a great time.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, since we're speaking of like universities and stuff, mine, where was yours? Where did you study and all that?
Yeah. I studied at North Carolina State University, and I studied the computer science program there. I actually started as a electrical computer engineering double major, and I was focused more on the hardware and those sorts of things. And then after taking 1 year of classes, I was really looking forward to all the programming classes that were ahead, and really not looking forward to any of the circuitry or electronics classes that were ahead. And I was talking to the guidance counselor, and I was like, yeah, I really would love to just do programming, but switching to computer science just feels like the easy way out. And she was like, it's not easy. It just means you really like those subjects. And I was like, huh, you're right. And then I switched to study computer science instead.
That moment when you like realize you have free will. You're like in your 20s and you can make your choices and it's okay. It's fine.
Yeah, definitely. The free will of accepting an invite to go speak at a university in Portugal was also, very, very fun. And I really got a lot out of that trip. I'm really glad I got to come.
One thing I must say, like I think of this sometimes, your name sounds the least American I've ever heard. Like it's if someone like told me you were Swedish, I just believe them. I don't know anything about Swedish, like the language, but I don't know. Scheviak sounds close enough. I don't know, something. Swedish.
Interesting. Yeah, it's not Swedish. I don't know how to tell you how it's not Swedish, but usually Swedish last names are most commonly either somebody's son, like Johansson, or but then it can also be, I think there was a reason for this, like around the turn of the century, they needed to enlist people in the military, and there were way too many people without any last names at all. And so they just started giving people last names based on either where they were from or some kind of like landmark near where their family is from. So you end up with people whose last name translates to stuff like mountain stone or leaf river or like tall mountain, like all these different last names that are basically just places in nature. And unfortunately, my last name doesn't seem to be that. But my family's best guess at where our last name comes from is like Prussia, kind of like East Germany, Poland area around sometime in the mid 20th century, or I think that's how you say it, 18th century, 20th century. I never remember what centuries are, 1900s. And yeah, we think it's Polish-ish. And the theory is that they came to America, got to the immigration line, and our theory is that the last name used to be something like Scheviak, and then they got to the immigration and they got asked like, "What's your last name?" And they said Scheviak, and the immigration people separated Ya and Scheviak and took the Ya as like a yes, like Ya Scheviak, and so the Ya got cut off our last name and we just became Scheviak in the U.S. So that's our theory of the origin story of the last name, but we really don't know, to be honest.
Nice lore drop, I guess. Like, how does one go from the US to Sweden? Like, what happened there? Like, I'm supposing you graduated from college, and I guess like computer science. Like, I don't really know how it works out there in the US, because you guys like choose your curriculum and you get like majors and minors depending on like how many classes you get. Is that it? Like from each subject?
Effectively, I think when you do what's called matriculating, which is to kind of go from a broad study into a very like a specific study, usually a major. So you kind of, at least for me, you go in understanding, okay, I'm doing something in engineering, and so your first year of classes is just general engineering classes to get you kind of like in a general understanding, and throughout that year, you're kind of tasked with figuring out what you want to specialize in, and from there you can then choose which major you want, and if you want a minor you can also choose that. And for me, what that meant was that the minor was how I choose to spend my electives, which were basically the courses outside of the ones I have to take, that I can kind of choose to an extent what I take. And for the minor, it was I had to take 5 higher level math classes above Calculus 3 to do a math minor. I actually got 4 out of 5 classes through that, and I realized when I was in number theory that I just had no clue what was going on, and I also didn't really have any interest in finding out. And so I was like, maybe this isn't for me after all, and I was able to actually switch to what's called a concentration, which isn't like a major or a minor, but it's more like, hey, I did some electives that focus on this subject, and I did a concentration in video game design. And that meant I got to take some cool courses like Game Engine Foundations and beginning computer graphics course, and also cool stuff like science fiction and creative writing and film studies. So that was actually really cool because it gave me a much broader view into how creativity can be applied to generally like computer science and other things than just a purely like mathematical / programming focused degree.
I'll note some stuff down because I want to ask you about 2 things.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I think you like realize when sort of majoring in stuff, or like the equivalent here, it's like some people who give some classes. I have a teacher who feels like one of the only people qualified to teach what he's teaching. And like, I'm wondering who are the people who are talking about like game design as a class, or like game engine foundation? Like, are these like ex-game developers? Are they like academics who wrote papers and went to game jams? What?
Yeah,
Assuming you know, I guess, the backstory.
That's a great question. Yeah, I don't have an answer for my specific university professor. I can tell you that from people that I've met, it's sometimes people who work in the industry that teach as like a part-time job. And then it's also sometimes people who have been in the industry and just prefer to teach. And I would assume there's a third avenue, which is people who never went into the industry but just have a lot of passion about a specific subject, and they become a teacher there. And I think there's you get different learnings from each of those categories of people, and I've had all 3 different kinds of professors for different classes over the years. And you can always tell when someone has been in the industry because they're very practical about how they approach things, as opposed to the the ones who are very academic, which are much more about the love of the subject rather than like how to practically apply it. So yeah, all of them provide different benefits for different ways of doing it.
Yeah, and I think I see that. Like I personally prefer the more academic people, because like you can see the spark in their eyes sometimes, or they're like speaking about some stuff they're really care about. One of the reasons I chose like the major I chose was because of that. Because like I thought they cared a lot about what they're teaching, or like it seemed so at least up till now.
Yeah, I definitely understand what you're saying there. I've seen that too.
The other point you came across was like how sort of making games is a cool way to harness your creativity as like a software person. It's sort of something I've been looking into, because like I personally I don't really look forward to making websites and APIs for the rest of my life. And like me, many others most likely. And funny enough, like I have thought about game development a couple times, and like trying to make stuff, and I did make stuff on the side. And also, I've told you before, our first project as we get into college, or like or university, I guess is the term, is a game made in Haskell, which is a functional like language. And I lost myself in saying all this stuff. What was the question? The question was probably
game devs and creativity in software.
Yeah. You know what? What's in the document is just game dev and creativity. Because I thought I'd come up with a question by now. I haven't. Just go off, please.
Yeah, I can definitely touch on this. It kind of is a broader question than the one you're asking me, but I'll try to focus in on specifically like game dev. I would say there's no one best way to use this, like the interest or the skills that you have. I think it's a lot about how you want to use your skills, because there are a lot of different paths you can take. I think this is one thing that really frustrated me, especially in high school, which in the US is the step before university. In Swedish, there's like high school, and then there's something they call gymnasium before university. It's very confusing. But anyway, for those who are listening and want to understand that, it's the years before university. So when I was there, I felt like it was so narrow focused in what they tell you that you can study at university, and even narrower what you feel like you can do as a career. And that was perpetuated at university when I realized through my computer science program that for the last semester, you got this, it was called a senior design project, where you got to spend a semester working on a specific project, and then you have your output and a report that you make about it. That's like your final project. And all but one group had to do a project for like a company. So a company would hire a group of students for a semester, or they wouldn't hire them. They would bring them in for a semester, and the students would do a project through the company, and that would be their thing. And one group got to choose their project and do their own thing. And you can guess which one I did. I managed to be part of the one group that got to do our own project, and I was really happy about that. And the reason was because I felt so creatively limited by the opportunities that were given to us. And it's nothing against the university, it's nothing against the companies even. It's just that I think there's often this perception that like programming can only be used a certain number of ways, or like a law degree can only be used a certain number of ways for certain types of cases, or there's like there are an infinite number of things out in the world that can be done, and many of them can actually be a career. It's just that sometimes they're not the most common thing, so they're not really always talked about, and they're not always advertised. Sorry. So game dev is definitely for people that are feeling very creative and have a technical interest. Game dev is a really good option because it does scratch so many like itches at once. While there are a lot of layoffs that are happening in this industry right now, there are still a lot of jobs, like way, way, way more than in the past. So game dev is definitely a big industry now, whereas it wasn't before. And most of the jobs in that field are very creative in nature, which does give you a lot of room for, creativity. I have this quote that I really like from a movie called Robots, which I think is from like the year 2000 or something. And it was see a need, fill a need. And I really liked that quote from the movie because it gave me a really good way to guide what I ended up doing in my life, was to kind of identify where there was a need and then work to fill it. As an example of this combining with like the creativity software thing, I'll take Patreon. So like Jack Conte, who's the creator of Patreon, he's a musician. And he felt like something was missing in the content creation world. Like the patron of the arts from the old days like wasn't really a thing anymore. And he wanted to make a modern way for people to become patrons of art. So using I don't think he himself programmed it, but it's a good example of like the combination of creativity and tech to create a platform, Patreon, which has become one of the primary ways for artists and creatives to support themselves. And I think that's a really good example of the combination of using these different like parts of our brains to come up with a new innovation that allows us to be creative while also using our technical skills. And you mentioned you don't want to make web apps forever. I totally get that, especially because like feels like every year there's a new web app framework that we have to know or we're already behind, and I hate that. But like many websites are very creative, mobile apps, and in general there are a lot of options out there for using our creativity. But the game dev is a really good one. And I'm going to briefly touch on it. I promise not to rant too long about it, but there is at the moment like an undeniable commodification of creativity, and the creation of art and writing is under threat by AI and large language models. And while those models can't possibly create the kind of ingenious and like novel things that human brains can come up with, they are threatening the livelihoods and the jobs of people who want to use their creativity as a career. And that's tough. And it's something that needs to be acknowledged, that like that is a reality that people entering the creative industries today are facing. That got way off track from your original question, but here we are.
I think I find that quite interesting. Because also I don't know if like people falling for AI or something like in art. I feel myself falling for AI if it's an image. Uh, in the sense that I don't have the palette or the eye and like the trained eye to understand like good art as much as I do like good music. But yeah, I feel like it also thrives on a sort of lack of taste or conscious by the public. But also as a creative, as like a creative, you sort of depend on a wide public to like listen to you. In the case of music, which is like my hobby and stuff.
Mm.
And yes, I feel like it's under threat not only because it's being pushed so hard right now, risking being, I don't know, I don't want to say like controversial. I don't really know. I don't think there's a politics to what I can say or not here. The CEO of Suno, which is like an AI that's making like a company making an AI that makes music, just a couple of weeks ago, maybe months, came out and said the most heinous thing I've like ever heard. He said like, music is cool and people like music, but they don't really like making it. It's too much effort. You gotta learn an instrument and spend hours practicing. And like, bro, it's like people are making decisions about the future of fields they have like no understanding of. Because that to me is like the worst take of all time. Saying that like an artist does not enjoy the process at all, and what they actually want is the product. That's the only thing that matters is really strange. And also because like by the nature of how AI works, it comes out by design a generic thing. Like, I don't know how you would like get an AI to make something that's not generic. What parameter you have to tune to say, okay, yeah, like all the knowledge you got, okay, but now this random ass fucking this random variable now gets like tweaked strangely and like make something, and that might make some interesting outputs. But even that seems like an artistic input that I've never seen made, or create an output that is interesting at all.
Yeah, it's both unsurprising and frustrating, because it is not the people who are creative that are pushing these AI tools for quote unquote creativity, right? Like it's people who want to make money off of the creation and the commodification of the art and find an opportunity to do so. Because there is of course, like, tools are so important to the creation process. Like, it's undeniable that like you can't really make electronic music very easily without, a DAW. You need the workstation to do that. And those tools probably made a lot of old school artists feel threatened, and probably made them feel like their art of using physical instruments was less valuable because of that. So there's always that tug between, like, is this a tool to aid in the creation and improve the creativity process, or is it actually just taking away the creativity and funneling things towards the act of just producing stuff to be sold, and to basically not to basically like lower the creative process into kind of a less important role in the output of something. And I think that is something that's important to keep in mind, especially when it comes to game dev, that there are many companies out there that are making games that only exist to make money, or like even to manipulate people using like psychology to play games longer, and to do that with the express purpose of just keeping people playing the game and ultimately making the company more money. And that, to me, goes against what I believe games stand for and what they provide to humanity, which is a lot of things, honestly. Like, games are, and art is, it is to be human. It, like, to play is to be human, and to create is to be human. And the technical commodification of these things, while it has always existed to some extent, is definitely something that we're seeing a lot more of now, which, yeah, it frustrates me, definitely.
In a game dev, does that create an like unrealistic expectations of people? Like, do you think people expect things faster and better because of like how tech has evolved and shaped everything? Because I feel like in music we see people now feeling that I could just, or like maybe not music specifically yet, which strangely I would think music would be simpler than video, but it seems not. But it's now way easier to make videos and make like content, and I think it's warped people's sort of perception of what it takes to create. And I was like trying to tie this with, do you feel like people have those kinds of expectations of game devs as much as maybe there's of like designers and programmers and stuff?
Interesting question. I think it's proportional to the amount of humanity that you share. As with a lot of things, I think the more vulnerable and open you are about your process, the more people are understanding of it. For instance, when we were working on the Caves and Cliffs update at Mojang, and it was during the peak of the pandemic, we were all under a lot of both like emotional stress, but also like the pandemic. And it was challenging switching to working from home, and there were just a lot of things that impeded our process, that we hadn't planned on. And we realized, like, we're not going to be able to deliver this on time, even if we were to crunch super hard for it, which we don't do anyway, and we don't want to do. So we made the decision to split the update in two. And when we went out to the community with that, they were so understanding and so accepting of us doing that, because it was a decision we made out of it was like a human appeal, like human to human, like, hey, we love this game too. We can't do it all right now, but we're going to do it, we promise. And that was received very well by most people. And I think in the same way, like, people are very understanding, especially when it's people or a cause that they know or that they agree with or that they believe in or that they support. And I think the trouble we see is when we lose the human factor, because we're so separated. Like, the internet brings us closer together, and it also separates us in a way, because in a way you can just hide behind your screen. And it's unfortunate that I think a lot of times that separation also can add a level of, like, not accepting people as much, because you're not making that human to human connection. But I find that almost all the time when you have that human connection, people are very understanding.
One thing I've been observing, I think we've all observed this, is essentially like there's less empathy or a sense of community for the people who are like geographically, physically closer to you, and more in online spaces. Both because like you spend more time online than before, than ever, I guess, in history. But as has like spending time online has been a thing. It's like more intense than ever, most likely, or maybe dying down because post-pandemic people are like going out more again. But also because of like algorithms and stuff that they make you aid you in believing the world is just what you see of it, in the sense that it makes you almost forget that people actually do disagree with you, and they're like a lot of things might not be as cut and dry to everyone else as it seems to you. Be it like music tastes, even like taste in games, or like in politics and stuff. And I think that probably aids in that fact, like human connection might be becoming more algorithmized in the sense, like, and that also like alienates people from each other in that way, because you kind of lose a certain amount of empathy for the people who are not in those like more specific spaces you reside in. I would say.
Yeah, definitely. Like, it's very visible if you play a lot of online games. Like, when you don't really know the people you're playing with, people tend to just dump their emotions on you, whatever they're feeling at that very moment. But when you're playing with people maybe you've played with before, or ones that you like know online and you play with them regularly, there is a lot more empathy because you have that human connection, even though you're separated.
Risking sort of going back a lot in the conversation. Also about like that idea of like, okay, updates take a long time because they're like big undertakings. You were like, as people may know, you made like mods, and a like very famous mod before going into the game itself in Minecraft, right? And like we all get this sense that people who make mods, like a mod can come out way quicker than like a feature. It seems like it's either easier to make, or like the corporate like process and maybe red taping is a lot more severe when you have like a whole game, a whole ecosystem. Or like the third sort of thing people say is that game devs and like the actual games are lazy. Since you've been like through like both sides of the spectrum, what would be your take on this?
Yeah, this is always a fun
The
and
question.
fairly common question, actually, which makes sense because there are a lot of preconceived notions, and Yeah, I've seen my fair share of like, oh, modders can do this so fast and Mojang so slow, etc., etc. Um, yeah, where to begin? So, just for context, I've been a Minecraft modder for 14 years, and I've worked as a developer on Minecraft for about 7. When it comes to adding new features, as a modder, it's often as simple as coming up with an idea and then coding that idea into reality. As a modder, I can put as little or as much work I want into something and then release it. I can fix as many or as few bugs as I want. I can create systems that are as cleanly or messily coded or super abstract or very specific as my heart desires. And my features can be as balanced as I want or completely broken if I want them to be. And that's, yeah, because I'm a modder. I can do whatever I want. I can add whatever I want to the game. And that's awesome. But when we're creating Minecraft features for the game itself, everything we add not only has to fit with the short and long-term plans we have for the game, but we also have to be mindful of performance, quality, game balance, potential technical debt, and like production time. And the larger the feature, the more bugs that are probably going to need to be fixed before release. The more game changing the feature, the more time we need to spend ensuring that the overall game balance is kept. When we're adding an entirely new feature, we have to ensure that we aren't significantly impacting performance in a negative way. And we have many thoughts like that we keep in the back of our minds when we're adding a new feature. For example, when we added the crafter, which is like an automated crafting table, we didn't just add the first idea that came to mind. Instead, we took our time to understand like what is the community expecting from automated crafting? What do they desire from it? Then we did some UX research to see what potential pain points there might be. We iterated a lot on the visuals, like a lot, to ensure that it was clear to players what was happening when you're using the block. That's how we came up with like the different little like redstone lights and the toggleable slots inside the crafter UI. We spent a lot of time as well, like balancing to ensure that both advanced redstone users would have fun with it, but also people who, yeah, like were maybe intermediate towards redstone, like maybe had a bit of redstone knowledge, but definitely weren't experts. We really wanted many types of redstone, like knowledgeable players to be able to use it. So it took some time to balance it in a way that it was fun for both like sections of redstone knowledge. And we also tried out several different ideas just to ensure that the one that we were pursuing was the one we felt was most promising. So basically, this process isn't always quick, but it is necessary to ensure that we give each feature that we add the most love possible and the most respect, both like when it comes to existing game content and also future content. Like it's really important that when we add a feature, we're not closing off like game design space. I say this like as a game designer, but like when we add things to the game, we really want it to be interesting, both in terms of like what content already exists and what possibilities it opens up for the future. So when you say, like you said, a mod can produce features way quicker than features in the base game, then I would say that that modding framework is doing its job perfectly to enable the super creative community that we have to create awesome modded content. And that's awesome. And as a modder, I think it's fantastic. And modding has come a long way to be quick to add things to the game. It wasn't always that way. Like, oh my gosh, when I started, there was literally a spreadsheet where all the block IDs from different mods were there. So you could know what mod you were compatible with and which ones you weren't. And in the early days, there weren't even like readable names. It was like super obfuscated stuff, like I talked about in the talk that I gave. So yeah, it's different. But anyway, for us working on the game itself, we are more focused on sustainability over the long term so that we can ensure that we can keep shipping new, unique gameplay features. And I mean, each release that we have has like hundreds of bug fixes, performance improvements, Usually like expanded creator capabilities. Oftentimes we have a few requests from like server owners that we add in just for like server performance, or just generally highly requested features from the community. And we are always like listening and taking in like what the community is saying, and trying to cater to that. So yeah, as oh yeah, and for me as a designer, one of my favorite parts of my job is actually working with the other designers to figure out which ideas fit in the game and follow the game director's vision, and which ones don't.
When I yeah, I was gonna ask, like, before I foresee we're we're probably going into, like, okay, how do you decide something is Minecrafty, or yeah, like Minecrafty, like, does this make sense in the wider sort of context of the game, and like how many people play it? That whole, like, a thing about, like, the axolotls, where, like,
Yeah.
no one knew what that was, and then they added it. You guys added it into the game, and then the Google search results skyrocketed. One thing I wanted to ask before then was, like, what do you mean by a technical debt? What, like, is that like a technical term? Because I don't think I've heard it before,
Mm,
and I'm curious.
so imagine that you can think of, okay, so as a programmer, there are so many ways to solve every problem. And let's say that there's one optimal way to solve the problem that is the most reusable, the most abstracted, and the most like very like, oh, it's so pretty code. I love that we made it so pretty, and also the API is super simple for designers to use, and those sorts of things. So that's like the dream scenario. But let's say you also have, the goal of fixing 100 bugs and developing all these systems and data driving these components and doing these optimizations for server owners and all these things. And so you're like, oh, okay, so we're not going to get our optimal solution in, but we can do this solution, which, well, it's not the best and it kind of isn't what we want long term. But if we add it and then this feature depends on it, then we're kind of putting ourselves in a situation where now that feature and the system will need to change in the future to be how we actually want them. So you're kind of creating debt for your future selves to have to solve those problems later.
Were there any, like, major stalls, going sort of back and, like, fixing a bunch of stuff that was, like, ugly? One one thing I sort of wonder is, like, how good is is the code? Like, how pretty, and, like, has it always been as good or bad as it is?
I mean I would say that's quite subjective. I would say there are people at Mojang, and there have been over the years people who are just super passionate about cleaning up and refactoring the code base. I know one teammate of mine was known for super mass refactors on the code base, and yeah, like it's a really good thing, and it's great to have someone on your team that does that. But it can also be really tricky when you have a lot of feature branches, and then somebody pushes this gigantic change, and then everyone has to rebase all their changes on the ones that have been done. But yeah, like there's a huge effort internally to keep pushing for a cleaner code base. For a code base that's 16 years old, that is super hard to maintain, especially with like all the different people and like the different projects that use the code base. For instance, like the Minecraft Education Edition and the Minecraft Marketplace and the base game, and like there's so many aspects to keep in consideration, and the fact that it's run on so many devices. So yeah, it is really, I want to say a moving target. It's a really, really difficult thing to say that you have perfectly clean code, but it's always a great thing to keep striving after, especially when you're like, okay, we're going to do a lot of work in this system, so let's do some cleanup while we're in there, and you kind of take it bit by bit.
It's like a strangely a satisfying process, like to like refactor and make the code pretty. And like I've and me and like most people in my situation and like in the course have had like that experience of like going back, rewriting stuff as like a class or like a really nice, I don't know, type of function. I don't know. But yeah, it's weirdly nice. It's funny because I don't really like I don't want to say I don't like coding, but I might not like coding as much as the other guy, like as much as most people in the area. But I do like really like looking at a code base and at a problem and going like, how can I make this as abstract and like beautiful as possible? Somehow, at some point, I thought OP was like the best thing ever because it sort of allows you to do that. But I think other paradigms also do allow you to do it and are less weird. I'm like a big OP hater, which is weird coming like speaking to like a Java developer.
I mean, I can say that I don't know a better word for it. I'm a practical programmer. So I really do, I can enjoy programming, but I'm not someone who sits down and can just code all day on anything just because it's really fun to make clean or really beautiful code or very satisfying code or solving really complex algorithm challenges. Like for me, it's the tool for the job. And if the job is to make a game and it needs programming, I'm super happy to do it. If it's a website for the Love Tropics charity event, super happy to do it. If it's learning how like to contribute to OBS to fix some bug that will let us do some weird streaming thing, sure. But I definitely understand where you're coming from. That like there's some kind of satisfaction in making things pretty and clean, almost like when you when like my apartment is a mess and then I clean it up and like, that's great. But then, I'm also practical and I'm sometimes like, oh, I'm too tired. I'm just gonna throw my backpack down and go lay on the couch. And then it gets messy little bit by little bit. And then, yeah, I don't know how I got here, but here we are.
How do we get here? Funny reference.
Hee.
Yeah, sort of. Now I'm doing the backtracking. We were sort of about to talk about when one adds features, they also must comply with like the vision of the game. How, I don't know, how does that work? Because like I guess you have a creative director, right? Like a person whose whole like deal is that. I have like 1,000 questions about that. Like how much is it like a collective process? Is it like that one person makes the call and we have to follow it? Or
Yeah.
however else?
Yeah, so Agnes is our amazing game director, and she puts forth a creative vision for what the game should be like at a high level. So like for instance, if we're doing an update, it's her role, and she works with the designers that are on the team making the update to come up with the idea usually. But she's also thinking ahead, like what does the game need? What are players asking for? What do we feel the game needs? What is fun? She's thinking about these things and kind of producing this high level, guidance for us. But then as for the individual features, that's usually, it's like designers will either collectively come up with ideas or individually propose ideas, which then get kind of collectively agreed upon. And it's not designed by committee, it's designed by designer, but we reach a united vision of what will make it in and what will not. And we often end up in these really really long discussions about whether something is Minecrafty, or whether it's like pushing the boundaries too much, or if it's not fun enough, or whatever it might be. And those discussions are so vast. It's kind of impossible to summarize what is Minecrafty, because it's both objective and subjective at the same time, as it's very vague. And that's kind of what I love about it, is that there is no clear path to exactly what is Minecraft going to be. And I kind of love that, because it's very open for us and for the individual contributors on the team to put their vision into the game, but in such a way that it's not just their vision. It's like their vision, but collectively Minecraftified in a way, if that makes sense.
That's a funny word. Minecraftify. One other thing I think I'd like to ask, I have it like in my notes over here, is whether you feel fulfilled, and what do you think it takes to be and feel fulfilled in software? Because it's a thing that I fear a lot about, like, the future as a person who's doing this. Because to an extent, I'd like to have an impact. I don't really know how. Risking making this more about me than it should. I, as of now, am doing research, like in academia, and it's fun, it's cool, and I guess to an extent it gives me the sense that I'm contributing to something. But I also feel like the vision I have of software, or the companies that I know about, or like most of them, are like, okay, you're gonna help us either make a product, like a specific product, or you're gonna help companies make web apps, or you're gonna work in crypto, even though it's weird and you don't like it. I don't know. So I guess my question ends up being, firstly, do you feel like what you're doing is cool? And do you feel fulfilled in your career? And like, why, I guess?
So yeah, that is a really great series of questions. I will start somewhere and end somewhere, and hopefully there's some good stuff in between. So I can start off by saying that I do feel quite fulfilled in my job, and I feel that partially because I think Mojang is a really nice place to work, and because I absolutely love Minecraft, and partially because the people I work with are just amazing. I work with some of the nicest and most passionate and smartest people that I've ever met. And to me, the most important part of it is that they're really nice, because it's just a really great environment to be in. And when there's a problem, it's never like on one person usually to solve. It's like, okay, like something happens, let's solve this as a collective, let's figure this out as a team. And I think having, like, this kind of applies generally in life. Like, if you want to go, what was that saying? If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. I think that really has applied in my career as well. I find it so much more satisfying and fulfilling to be doing pretty much anything if it's with people that I really like to be around. But I will acknowledge that I don't think I would feel fulfilled if I felt that every day I was working on something that I just fundamentally didn't like, or that I completely didn't believe in, or that I disagreed with, or was actively going against my values. But that's because I'm a very values driven person, and it's kind of core to my being that if I'm not working on something that is making me feel like I am contributing to the betterment of the world, or to helping people, or to making people feel happier, or give people joy or great experiences, if I feel that there's any amount of me working against that goal, I will feel demotivated. And that demotivation will, in turn, cause me to feel unfulfilled. And I definitely have seen that in like various people that I studied with. And I'm not gonna to call anyone out by name because I they're all my friends. But I can see the difference definitely in people who have chosen a career path purely based on like the money they make versus the career path of the passion project. And I will add that like both are valid for their own reasons, because the ones who chose the money path, they work their job, but they spend all their time and joy in their free time on stuff that they really like and that they care about. And so the job is the job, but then the rest of their time, they have the financial freedom to invest in every hobby or interest that they have. And that's fulfilling in its own way. So there are multiple ways to reach fulfillment. And it's kind of, or I find it quite unfortunate that we live in a society where like we kind of have to spend the majority of our time working. So finding fulfillment through the job is typically the best way to to find fulfillment if you can, because then you are, yeah, like the majority of your waking and best brain hours are spent doing something that you care about and that fulfills you is obviously quite a nice thing if you can get it, but it is not always available to people. So I think having the understanding that you can also like use your skills in a professional setting, but also use your skills in a off professional setting, but still get to use them for something that fulfills you is definitely a possibility.
One thing this might like segue nicely into is we sort of left a question up for people to see if they wanted to ask you stuff, and one of the students asked like what would be your advice to people wanting to start in game development.
Yeah, that's a great question.
A very broad question.
Asked, yeah, I got asked this, I think, at the event as well. And I think it's really cool because I feel, yeah, I hope I could inspire some people. But my own, like, yeah. Okay, I'm going to restart that.
Feel free.
Also, okay. Yes. So I think that's a really great question. And I like that I also got asked it at the event because it's clearly something that's on people's minds. When it comes to going into the game industry, it's like there's many paths in, but none of them are as straightforward as learning like a specific language or tool set. And I think that's a big difference from the rest of the like technical programming fields. Like I feel like if you if for instance if you learned COBOL, you could pretty much instantly get a job at some obscure database like maintenance thing, and you get paid super well, but then you'd have to program COBOL all the time. But for getting into the game dev industry, it's not like learning the latest web dev framework, or even it's not like learning how Unity engine works or Unreal Engine works, even though that's of course very helpful. I think it depends really what you want to do in the industry. If you really want to get in as a designer like I did, then maybe you want to focus on making mods for games, because that is a very creative process where you're thinking about what do players want? How can I change this game, but change it in such a way that it feels okay, some people okay, many mods don't feel like they belong in the main game, but it can be a fun challenge for you to think about how could I make a mod that could fit in this game as actual content. That will lead you to analyze like, okay, what are the core systems of this game? What are the things that make this game what it is? If you're modding Minecraft, what is Minecrafty? And then you kind of come up with your own definition of what that is based on study of the game. And then you mod the game, create a modification. Sorry, I should have explain what that is. Creating a modification to the game or like an add-on that you feel would fit into the game, and you could justify it in a job interview, like, oh, but these systems work this way, so then the mod adds on in this way because I felt that fit really well with these other systems. Another example would be making your own games. That's a really, really hands-on thing you can do. And these days, the major game engines are all quite accessible, and there are so many tutorials out there. So making games has never been easier. So if you want to make your own game, there are so many like game jams out there that just last, 48, 78 hours, 72 hours. And then you get a theme, and then you go and you just make something. And you do those enough times, you start to learn the process, like the creative process, and you learn to minimize the amount of overthinking, because you really have to get down into the weeds as quick as possible to start making things. And it's really, I would say it's quantity over quality until you've done enough that the quality starts to just increase as a byproduct of doing it over and over and over. I really enjoy mod jams and game jams that I've done. And just generally getting into the industry, focus on a specific skill. If you're like a 3D artist and you really want to do that for games, like learn Blender, learn Maya. If you want to do like programming, then probably learning the languages that are used by most modern games, which would be, I guess, C++ or C#, probably is a really good place to start. If you want to meet people who are in the industry, go to game dev meetups. They're everywhere. And honestly, I will always recommend networking as the number one way to get into industries. It's not enough to be really skilled at something. You really, like, knowing people is always the easiest way in, because if people know you, then they're so much more likely to think of you when a job opens up, or when there's a hole in the team and they're like, man, we could really use this role. They'll think of you, and they'll probably be willing to recommend you for a job if they know, like, oh yeah, I know Carlos, he's great at functional programming, we should totally get him in here. I think one final thing would be something I've thought of recently, because I've been messing around with the Godot engine in my spare time, and it's an open source game engine. I mean, how cool is that? So they've been going for over a decade now, I believe, and it's super cool seeing the progress that they've made on that engine, but also being in their Discord and seeing how active it is. Like, you can contribute to the engine itself. You can make plugins that people can use. You could write documentation. You can like make your own projects and see, like, oh, there's a hole here, and you can make feature requests. Like, it really helps you to see the games as their whole sum of their parts, rather than just one specific specialization, and realize that, like, wow, there are a lot of aspects that go into games. I mean, we have we have an audio designer, and a lot of what he does is just finding stuff around his apartment that's like, how do I make this sound? How do I make this combination of sounds? And then he just, I don't know, records his shoe tapping, puts it into Reaper, works some magic, and suddenly he's come out with this amazing like whoosh sound. I don't know, made that up, but it's really, really impressive and cool to see. So there's, like, every experience in games is coming from someone's creative mind, whether that's a visual thing, an audio thing, a narrative thing. A lot of games have storytellers and people whose entire job is to just come up with the plot. And then if that's what you love doing, then maybe you focus less on the technical skills of game development and more on like writing and world building and maybe character building or plot building. Like, there's so many aspects of storytelling that are super, super utilized by the game industry. So yeah, there's so many paths to choose from, I would say.
Yeah, that's a nice answer. So this is when we get into like the more relaxed part of the interview, and I'm supposed to ask some like goofier questions, less short answer questions, you know. Problem is, I don't have that many. I was saving this one for the end, but I think it works nice whenever. What would be like media recommendations by you? This meaning like either a book, an album, a movie, like something you think people should experience.
Okay. Yeah, great question. I would say TV show wise, there was one that I watched last year that really impressed me. It wasn't what I was expecting at all, even knowing going in that it was going to be something kind of mind bendy. But it's a show called The Leftovers, and it's like one day some percentage of the population just like poof disappears out into thin air, and it's the story of the people that are left and how they react and how the world kind of evolves from there and how people handle it. And I found this show recommended through a YouTube video I watched, which was talking about a few other shows I like and movies that I've enjoyed, because I love zombie shows and zombie movies, and it was talking about the evolution of zombie shows and movies and how they used to be very much about surviving zombies, and nowadays they're more about like the interpersonal connections of the people that are left and the relationships between them and the humanity side of things, which I found that really interesting. And The Leftovers really, really goes into that in a super interesting way. So I super recommend that. I watched it on HBO, I think. Another show that I'm rewatching now from my university years is a show called Psych, which is a really goofy comedy of a psychic detective and just like it's so ridiculous to even try and describe the show, but it's a comedy and it's very goofy, and the jokes they make in that show are sometimes just really like frustrating and stupid, and then other times I'm like rolling on the ground laughing because it's so funny. And also there's a pineapple in every single episode, and I'm trying really hard as I rewatch it to find the pineapple in every episode, because it's 8 seasons. So the fact that they kept that bit going the entire time is super impressive. And then actually art-wise, so a friend of mine who I've done some projects with and who used to work at Mojang, her name is Mariana. She is just an exceptionally talented artist. And she has a Substack called The Round Square, where she posts a monthly roundup of all the art that she's done. And she's a super, super talented concept artist for games, but she has done a lot of work recently on more physical mediums and working on her like drawing and her painting and doing things by hand, not just like digitally but analog as well. And she scans them in, and it's been really, really cool to see how she has explored that space. And she's done some really interesting art on like the subway, depicting like everyone around her being engrossed in their phones, and the idea of everyone like being in the same space but actually not really being in the same space. So I find her art super inspiring, and she always tells a really compelling story with her art. You know what? That reminds me of one more thing, which she recommended to me, I think last year. And
recommendation.
Yeah, exactly. A recommendation from a recommendation. We're getting super meta here. It's a Brazilian indigenous activist named Ailton Krenak, and he has some essays that he has. So for me, they've been translated to English. Actually, for you, it would probably be perfectly fine to read them as they were in Portuguese. But he's been on some radio shows, especially during the COVID pandemic, and some of his stuff has been translated into like short books, and that I have on my shelf. And they have really awesome titles like Ideas to Postpone the End of the World and Ancestral Future and Life is Not Useful. And especially that last one, I found it really, really inspiring because it's like a book about life being a dance, and it's not about, yeah, the first chapter is called "You Can't Eat Money," so that tells you anything about it. It's just really inspiring to me to learn about how people that their life is completely different than mine. How do they live? How do they see the world? How did their ancestors see the world? How does that compare to how I perceive the world now? Super inspiring to me.
Oh, that sounds nice. I'll check that out when I get the time. Now, one actually short form question. What's your like favorite animal? And you can't say bee nor axolotl, I guess. Those are like the two non-options you can't say.
There's so many cute animals out there. So many. It's too mainstream nowadays to say capybara. But to be fair, I liked capybaras before they were mainstream because they're so chill. I love, my go-to relaxation is to watch videos of capybaras with water pouring on their faces when they have a yuzu balanced on their head. Like it's the most relaxing thing
think
that
I've
I can
seen that.
possibly imagine. But I'm also very fond of quokkas, if you've heard of them.
I think I know. They look
They're
similar,
like
don't they?
the happiest looking, smiling, I think they're marsupials.
Quokka, yes. With two Ks for anyone at home.
Exactly.
What the hell?
Quokka. They're so happy. They look so happy.
What the? For reference, I'm looking at pictures now and they look goofy. Very goofy.
They're so cute.
Jesus.
So cute. Australia has simultaneously the most like dangerous animals and also the freaking cutest ones.
You gotta fucking
the balance.
You gotta balance, yeah. That was nice. Really nice interview. Thank you for being available and like actually I hope people get some things out of this interview. And also I think it's the time, it's within parameters. Like it didn't take 2 hours to record. Really nice.
I was thinking, like, I didn't really give an introduction to myself at the beginning. Should I do that?
You can. We'll end with the introduction. Very quirky.
Yeah, I mean, I can. It's up to you.
Go for it.
Okay. Like, hey, I'm Cory Scheviak. I'm a game designer on Minecraft, and I've been doing this for almost 7 years now. I was also a former computer science student and former Minecraft modder, or I guess I'm still technically a Minecraft modder. And I also help organize a charity event called Love Tropics that happens once a year. And we raise money for various, environmental and community-related causes that are in the world's tropics. And in the past 7 events, we've raised over $250,000, which I'm super proud of. And yeah, I've also flown across the stage on a live stream in front of millions of people dressed as a bee. And that's apparently why I got chosen to be invited to the Software Engineering Week in Portugal. So you never know what certain actions you do are going to affect you down the line. Happy to be here.
And now we fade out.
New.